appreciate everybody coming. So when we were talking about this faculty development workshop, this kind of forum where we could share ideas with the faculty and the students, it's always valuable, we think, to hear from the alumni, to let them tell us what we could do better in terms of when you graduate from the College of Business at NIU, when you went out there into the workforce, what did you wish you had known, or what do you wish you had understood better that we could maybe help with current students? So that was the idea with this particular panel. We've got some familiar faces here and some relatively recent graduates as well, so hopefully it'll be a good conversation. So I'm just going to make quick introductions, and then I'll let them tell you a little bit more about themselves, and then I'll turn it over to the panel, and we'll do some Q&A, and here's the boss. So David McCoy, Becky Megason, Anne-Marie Edwards, and Josh Folkers. So we really appreciate you all taking the time to come back and share your experience and your wisdom with us. So I'll just turn it over to you, David, if you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I'm not an alumni of NIU, first of all, so that was a mistake. But I'm an alumni of the Belief Board. How's that? So I've been out here, but I've been in banking for the last 32 years. And currently is the CFO for the First National Bank and Trust in Beloit, Wisconsin. I joined them just about 3 months ago. I was with National Bank and Trust here in Sycamore, DeKalb area, for a number of years till we were acquired and by First Midwest, and was displaced as a result of that acquisition and search for a job. So, but highly consider the ethical business practices, and that item is one of the key differentiators for individuals that have worked for me over the years, and one that really differentiates people who I'm going to hire. And being able to find out that information and what makes them different is a very critical component of what I look for in a new hire, because I don't ever want to have to doubt anybody's ethical standards at all when I'm looking at an employee. I would love to trust everyone 100% of the time. Over my 32 years of experience, I've definitely learned that I can't do that, because people are going to let you down and people are going to break those rules. But I'm sure we'll talk more. Becky?
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having us here. It's great to be back on campus. I'm Becky Megason, and like David, I'm not a undergrad from NIU. Actually, I'm an honorary. I'm an honorary alum from the College of Business. I too got involved with the university probably 10, 12 years ago when we originally developed the Belief program. My career, I have a degree, an undergraduate degree in accounting. I graduated from Illinois State University, and after 34 years at the same company, having survived 3 acquisitions, working for I think 7 CEOs, I decided to retire last November. So I'm in that kind of post-retirement phase, trying to figure out what that new normal is. But I spent quite a few of my years, in my early years, I worked for, locally you would know, possibly Nicor Gas, the public utility. Well, I ended up retiring from the corporate company called Southern Company Gas, which is located out of Atlanta, Georgia, just in November. But while I started with a degree in accounting, I spent many, many years of my career in the operations side of the house. I worked in accounting, but gradually moved out to the operations, learned the business of the business, and then probably 20 plus of the 34 years I was with the company, I worked in the human resources area. And most recently working in the talent development, which is all the talent acquisition, all of the training, development, and the labor relations side of the house. So graduates have been a big part of my life, not only from the acquisition side, but also the retention side. So I look forward to chatting with all of you. And once again, thank you for having us here today.
Good morning. Anne-Marie Edwards, and I too am not an NIU alum. However, not yet though. We're working towards that. I am a career counselor on campus. I work in career services. And I support primarily majors within the College of Business. I think I'm the support for every major with the exception of 2. and that's finance and OMIS. And I also support hospitality and tourism management and fashion merchandising within the College of Health and Human Sciences. So if you can see, all of my majors have one common thread. They're all business. My background is hospitality. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in hospitality and tourism management, as well as an MBA. And my background is more in food service, and so I worked in most immediate K through 12 as a food service director. And so I was a food service director at like 26, which is very interesting, to have to direct other people who have been in a business double that you've been alive. So that my experiences from that vantage point were very interesting, and I decided I wanted to come back and really work with students that are business majors focused, because I realized there was so much that I did not know, but was still expected to do when I graduated. So I look forward to sharing those experiences and information with you.
My name is Josh Folkerts. I am an NIU alumni.
Oh, yay!
Graduated here in 2012, was part of LEAD in the Belief program, also a student accountancy society. Had really good experiences all throughout my education here. Went on to work for PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, for about a year and a half. And two main events kind of ended my time there. One, the client that I was working on, Beam, as in Jim Beam and Maker's Mark, was acquired by Suntory, which is a Japanese company, and Deloitte audits them. So that was the client that I absolutely loved. I mean, who wouldn't want to work on a spirits company? Got to go to Kentucky all the time, and literally I did inventory counts of barrels of bourbon, just counting them. It was awesome. But Deloitte took that over, and a lot of us were reassigned to other jobs that weren't as good, so we started to look at a different direction. And also, I was trying to get a girl to date me for about a year. She finally said yes. She was working at PwC, and when she said yes, I'm like, all right, my job is done here. Time to go to a new role. But so went over to actually a nonprofit, totally different. Was running with this group called Team World Vision. They run the Chicago Marathon every year to provide clean water to communities in Africa. And did that for 2 years, just running with the team, and a position opened up to lead the Chicago market. So I lead our Chicago Marathon team, which has about 2,000 runners at it every year. Largest charity by a factor of 3. Last year raised just under $2 million for clean water, which was clean water for 40,000 kids. So I've had the chance to go to Africa a couple of times, meet some of the kids that are work benefits, see the projects that we've built, and it's been a really fun experience getting more people involved, people who never thought they would run before, taking on the challenge of a marathon for a good cause. But it's really interesting to see the shift of how ethics and LEAD has really prepared me, both in PwC, but then also how different it was going into the nonprofit world, and how applicable it is at both, just in two totally different sectors. So excited to be here and talk a little bit more with you guys.
The panelists were provided with some questions to kind of prepare ahead of time, the sort of things we wanted to talk about. So, David, if you wanted to start in terms of, as a recent graduate, not as a recent graduate, Josh, if you want to start, as a recent graduate, if there are things specifically, especially given the sort of the non-conventional nature of the career path you've taken, if there are things you would have wished to have been exposed to during your time at NIU, and then for the rest of you, from your perspective as having hired or worked with young graduates, you know, from that perspective, if there are things that you wish people that you have brought into your organizations would have known or would have been exposed to, what would those things be? So, Josh, you want to?
Yeah, what comes to the top of my head is just being a more well-rounded student in all areas of business, because I obviously don't have stats around it, but it'd be interesting to see how many people that started in one role are still in that role years down the road. So when I was here, I was focused solely on accounting. I thought that's what I was going to be doing. I had the partner mindset, thought it was going to be the rest of my life, and it switched so drastically. And I wish I would have been exposed to more areas, things like UBiz, or is it 310, that kind of gives you a little bit of all of the different areas. I love classes like that. Things that I thought at the time were pointless and didn't pay much attention, now all of a sudden I'm wishing I had some more of those things, whether it's public speaking or management, even sales. A big part of what I do now is just selling Team World Vision to mostly churches we go to. We get on stage, talk for 3 to 5 minutes, tell people they can do the marathon, but that's our big way of recruiting new runners. And I'm having lots of meetings with these pastors and other organizations, and I wish I had more of that sales background, where I was so focused in college on the numbers and thinking I'm going to be in front of a computer for 16 hours a day. I don't need to be able to talk to people or sell things. So just having that more well-rounded background, more classes like UBiz, even though some of you students probably are dreading that right now, but it's really beneficial in the long run.
So we're gonna go down the line, okay, okay. So what I would say, for students at least, that I wish that they understood that when companies are coming to look for them, it's because they actually want to see you succeed. They don't want to hire anybody that they think would fail. And I think one of the things that when I interact with students and talk to students, oftentimes they are either they're super stressed or they're super like, I'll do that after I graduate. And from the standpoint of once you graduate from here, like you are really an adult. The bubble has burst. There's no more things that used to be aren't necessarily. And when you go to a company, they expect you to learn and produce. And I think that that's a really huge shock for a lot of students, that a company really does expect you to do what they hired you to do, right? And they may not give you all of the training that you need. And as I was having a conversation yesterday, I said, I didn't have Google when I was coming through. If I needed to learn something, I had to figure out how to make a budget, how to balance said budget, how to do month end. And I think that just taking advantage of the resources that you have at this point, and gearing students toward understanding, which a lot of students already have that, but gearing them towards understanding that there is a life outside of NIU, but while you're here, tap into all of these different things that you have at your fingertips. One of the things that I am in charge of and oversee is the Career Resource Center. And my main goal in life is to eliminate every book that's in that center and make it more of a real world center. And so we have workshops, we bring in alumni, and over and over and over again, I find that we don't have enough students. So what that led me to believe is that students aren't necessarily taking advantage of those resources. And I think part of it is because they don't understand the connection to what they're going to be asked to do, right, in the real world. So if we have something and we do like a panel, Life After NIU or something like that, and no student attends, they're missing out on that information about what life is like after NIU. And then, as I so often have, I have students that come back and they say stuff like, wow, you were right, or wow, this professor was right, or I should have done this, or I should have taken advantage of these opportunities. And so, first of all, show this video to all the students and say, hey, you need to be getting involved. Like, we actually know what we're talking about. We've been where you've been or have seen some of the things that you've seen, and we're not really just here to as I say, shuck and jive you. We really want you to be successful in life. And so I feel like, just as a professional, I feel like if students not only knew that, understood it, but actually applied it, that it would really assist them post-NIU in their lives.
Okay, great, thank you. Josh, thanks for what you had shared with the group, especially as the most recent grad of the group, because my thinking is along the same lines as Josh's. What happens, what I see is, first of all, I commend all of you because students come out very well educated and skilled in the functional area that they have certain expertise in, whether that be accounting or IT, things of that nature. But I think what happens is, in some cases, especially when you get into corporate America, and I'm going to speak from the corporate America perspective, there tends to be kind of a siloed thinking, okay? This is my area of expertise, this is what I know, so I don't think out of the box. I'm looking at Terry right now and thinking about our HR professionals that come out. You know, there's HR by the book, but then there's HR in reality, which is totally different than the book. Now, you need to have the book understanding, the technical skill sets to do whatever, But every day, I mentioned I was my background's in accounting. I cannot tell you in all my 34 years, I was using my accounting skills, maybe not, my cost accounting skills as much as ever, but I was responsible for budgets for years, okay? I was responsible for liabilities and accruals, for huge benefit retirement plans. And so what happens, I think, and going back to what Josh was saying, where I was headed with this, is we have to help students understand that they need to think out of the realm of just the functional area that they have their expertise in, because you will constantly be flexed with needing to know how to sell a little bit, and you have to sell to your boss, you have to sell to your coworkers, you have to sell a project, you have to sell a budget. There's so many different aspects of that. So I think that while the students, I think, are coming out with just phenomenal technical skill sets, and the other thing I will say, phenomenal enthusiasm and passion, okay? I mean, look at Josh in the few short years he's been out of school, all the things that he's done already. Look at me, I spent 34 years in the same company, but I had careers within careers in that same company. And so having the ability to think broader, think out of your box, and having exposure to programs such as the Ethics to Belief program, it's phenomenal. Having exposure, things that for having professionals in here today talking to you as faculty. Because the other thing too, quite frankly, is as faculty, in many cases, you have a curriculum you've got to get taught. You only have so many hours to get that done. So how do you maximize that classroom space? Students, on the other hand, also, many students are here, they're working full-time, they're going to school full-time. There's so many demands on them, and helping them understand, how do I balance all this, and how can I be everything to everybody? Understanding you can't be. I see a head nodding. You can't be everything to everybody, okay? And understand when you come out of college, you're not necessarily going to have every skill set, but you have to have the ability to think broader and welcome in those other opportunities and seize those opportunities wherever they may be. And they can come through extracurricular activities, they can come through church groups, they can come through social groups, academic groups, study groups. They can come through many different aspects. But again, I think that it's all about understanding that the world is beyond the silo that I was trained for.
Wow, a lot there. And we do want this to be interactive as well. So if you have comments or questions or things as we're talking, feel free to just ask and interject. I guess from my personal experience going through college, I was not an A student. I was barely a B student because I was working 40 hours a week. I graduated in just over 3.5 years with my undergraduate degree, got married between my junior and senior year of college, worked at McDonald's and cleaned a medical center, cleaned the bathrooms, cleaned the exam rooms and everything to be able to make ends meet to go through college. I had to pay for my own college. I have a feeling a number of your students are probably doing the same thing. And it's also a huge disservice sometimes, I think, we do to students. Maybe speaks a little bit about what Josh said. When I went into college, I knew that I wanted to have an accounting degree when I got out. I had no clue what that meant when I was 18 years old. 17 years old is actually when I went to college. It sounded like a pretty good idea. It has worked out well for me, but at the same time, knowing what you want to do with your life, giving as much of that exposure to individuals who have actually been through it, whether it be somebody who graduated 5 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and just the little bit of exposure to be able to see what has gone in to their lives and why have they ended up where they are, is an area that I think would be as beneficial as possible. And I'm sure all of you have that same story. The really tough part is keeping to the curriculum and everything that you have to accomplish. Our daughter is a second grade teacher in a diverse school down in Nashville, Tennessee. She knew she wanted to be a teacher. She knew she wanted to teach English as a second language and go through that certification. I had no idea. She has one native English speaking student in her second grade class in Nashville out of 40 students she sees on a daily basis. She has 2 students that speak absolutely no English. I mean, academia did not prepare her for that, for what to do in those situations. But it's giving the principle for those students to be able to say, engage with challenges you face each and every day and do your very best. That's all I've ever asked for new graduates or students that come out of this, is the amount of effort that we ask people to put in. That's one of the most critical things. Most everything can be learned, even after the fact. I went on to talk about my education, a little bit of background. After I graduated, after I received my degree, after I started my first job, times were a little different there getting your CPA. I decided I wanted to get my CPA. So I did the Becker Review Study course over a period of 6 months, where that it was Tuesday and Thursday nights from 6 p.m. till 10:30 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I learned more after going through that Becker CPA than I did in all my years of college, because I'd already been working for a year and a half, and I realized the importance of the information that my professors tried to instill in my brain. Once I had that practical knowledge, I was able to say, here's how I can use that. I am not a professor. I don't know the best formula to be able to tell you how to accomplish that task. I think, in my mind, that was the greatest challenge. I had some professors who did an outstanding job of that, and I had some, frankly, that did not do a good job of that at all. They poured facts into my brain, but I didn't have any clue what to do with those facts and how to apply that information into the real world. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that you have from my perspective. And as I entered the workforce, I was prepared for debits and credits and things like that. I was not prepared for interactions with people, interpersonal relationships, the sales side. Those are things that I was like, what do I do with this? But I always gave 100% effort, and I asked people. The other thing, I guess I would say, just trying to wrap this up, is encourage your students to seek out a mentor, somebody that would be able to mentor them through their professional career. I always had 2 or 3 mentors and confidants that I could talk to anything about that was going on in my workplace and my personal life and things like that. I do come from a religious background. Some of them were from that side. Some of them were surely from the business side. And that was a huge benefit to me, to be able to go and seek out advice, because I had to realize that I actually don't know everything. Even if I graduated with a 4.0, top of the class, I really don't know everything. I need that mentoring and that advice.
Like David said, if anybody has any questions or anything, feel free to jump in. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so this is for like everyone. As a person that changed my major 3 times until I found my right field, how many times have you changed your major, and how did you know it was the right one?
I'll start. So I originally was admitted to college for athletic training because I'm a huge sports fanatic. I'm originally from Indiana. Sports was just ingrained in my blood. And I was like, I think I want to be an athletic trainer. And then before I even got to college, I changed to electrical engineering technology because I wanted to make a lot of money night and day. I didn't recognize that. And then my first few classes in electrical engineering technology, I've taken physics in high school, but at the college level, I was nothing. And so I walked in, and when you go to the bookstore to buy all your books, they were like, you need to buy all these supply kits. So I had like $1,000 worth of supply kits, and my first class was to build a power supply from scratch. And I remember thinking, I am going to tear something up today. And then what actually happened was I was in an analog class, and I crossed some wires and I set the proto board on fire. And I said, well, now it is time to find something different. And so I actually did some career testing. I was also in the choir at the time. And this girl was selling these glasses, and like just glasses with the university insignia on it. And I was like, oh, I think I kind of like that. And so I went to the career services department and took this career test. and it said hospitality, and I was like, hospitality? And so I went over to the major. I said, well, you know, this is not going to work, so I'll just go and just kind of see what else is out there. And so I talked to some people, talked to the person, talked to my friend that was in choir with me, and decided that, okay, maybe this would be a major. But of course, first I called home, and I told my mom I'm first generation, and I said, Mom, I think I'm going to major in hospitality. And she said to me, so you're going to school to be a waitress? And I remember thinking, maybe I am. Then I said, you know what? No, I'm not. And so then I had to kind of negotiate that conversation with her. And at the end of the day, I knew I was going to change my major. I mean, whether she knew it or not, or accepted it or not, like, I was thinking, I need to change this because I can't continue to go on like this. And so I ended up changing my major to hospitality and tourism management, which was way more business focused. I was a very introverted person, and so people would say, why hospitality? Like, you don't even talk. That's exactly why, because I want to be that. I enjoy that. And so I changed my major twice and then got to hospitality management and realized the one thing that I did like about engineering was I loved math. So, and I didn't like science. And at my university, you can take math and science credits interchangeably. So if I took the highest level engineering calculus, I did not have to take any science. And that like wrapped it for me. I was like, I'm going to hospitality, I'm not taking any science, I'm just gonna take math, and it solidified my decision. And I found that once I changed my major, I started rolling in it, right? And so I wanted to get involved. I wanted to be in the student orgs. I wanted to be a student leader. I wanted to read the material that was put in front of me by my professors. So I found that I had a passion for just learning about the industry and how I could integrate and what I needed to learn and the skills that were going to make me successful in that major. So that was kind of my experience. Did I answer your question? Okay.
I didn't change majors.
I didn't change majors, but like I mentioned, I changed jobs. So I understand like what you're feeling, and it can be a little scary, but you take what you learned and apply it to whatever you're gonna end up doing. Like just because I left accounting, I use accounting all the time, and it's made me more successful from most of the peers that I work with because I have that background. So even just I am fully focused on fundraising, but I have all these Excel sheets that I use to track and see when fundraising is going to come in, and have detailed accounts of all of our runners of what steps they've done and at what point in the season they are and when they've hit their fundraising goals. And I look at all of this, and it helps me in future years know what's working, what's not, that none of the other people I work with are doing because they don't even know how to use Excel. So like, use what you've had and apply that to whatever you're going into.
And I too, as indicated, I did not change my major, but when I actually got into the working world and I started, actually doing the accounting, when I started in accounting, I was in charge of the budgeting forecasting area. We had like 30 different subsidiaries, so I was doing full income statements, balance sheets, what have you, for these companies on an ongoing basis. And quite frankly, I got a little bored. And what happened was I was given the opportunity to go out into our regional operations, into the actual guts of the operations of the gas company as the budget accountant. And so I was then working with the leaders of all the different functional business units, such as sales, customer service, construction, what have you. And that's when I realized there was this big world out there within the same company. And I said, you know what? I enjoyed the accounting. I actually went back a couple of times to work on some special projects, but I realized I wanted to do something else. And so I cherished the days I was there, but my career prospered for me when I decided that wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do for the rest of my career. But, be careful though on how many, think about why you're making these changes. What's motivating you to make these changes? Is it because you're just not sure what you want to do? Is it because maybe, like Ann was talking about, I would not have been a good physics person either. I would have blown up the place too, okay? Science is not my background. I know that. So be thinking about why it is that you're making these changes. And there's nothing wrong with making the changes, but at some point you've got to kind of lock into something, and then hey, you can see there's all kinds of opportunity also. That help? Good.
Yes.
I find the most successful students that I work with are very resourceful and very flexible. And there was a professor here, I think he's gone, who would give the students an assignment but not a lot of direction. and then he would change the deadline, and then he would cancel the assignment, then he'd give them another assignment that was due the next day. And I know my students who work for me would complain about that all the time and get stressed out. But I said, this is what it is in the real world. And I'm wondering if there's a way that we can teach these students the flexibility to be resourceful and to be calm during these kind of changes. And like Josh said, not a lot of people stay with one company anymore. The 30-year career.
I'm an
is
anomaly,
no
I know that.
longer. Yeah, and so I think we need to teach them how to be more, you know, to turn on a dime and to be more flexible. And I don't know how, you know, what that is aside from these changing assignments all the time.
That's kind of interesting, because we do have to multitask all the time on things, and priorities change and you get interruptions on a daily basis. I guess from an observation, as students, for the most part, they're being asked to be self-sufficient, to learn the information. They're going to be tested as individuals on the information, and they're going to be assessed on how well they perform as an individual. I guess the other perspective that I see in the real world is I rarely am on an island at work, or have ever been on an island at work, where that I have to have that ability to do those things self-sufficiently. I've always had people to rely on. So in that nimbleness, if there's any way to create team in working on projects, homework assignments, and things like that, because that's more real world. You're going to have to rely on others too to be able to accomplish things in that communication style. I don't know that that directly addresses, but even giving them the expectations up front to be able to say, during this next term in school, I'm going to warn you that in order to help prepare you for the real world and business, I'm going to change some deadlines at the last minute. And I'm going to change projects midstream for you so that you understand why I'm doing that up front, because this is something you're going to have to use later in life. Very soon after you graduate, you're going to be pulled off one public accounting assignment and be assigned to another one before you're able to finish the first one. Yeah. And to be able, if there was some way to build that into a curriculum for even one semester, to be able to teach that as a skill, I think that's an excellent idea from my perspective, because that really happens.
Very much happens. And I explain it kind of from a very simplistic perspective, from the what and the how. I think that from a university academic perspective, we teach students very well on the what. So that's the technical side, that's the understanding of the application of the skills that they've been learned. But it's the how side that I think when they get into the real business working world, that can change. And that's where development of competencies such as conflict resolution, dealing with changing timelines, adversity, dealing also with different types of folks. Now, and I know that the college campuses are all very diverse, okay? But they're diverse in race, gender, what have you. But now when you get into the workplace, you've also got generational differences. So how do I deal with, in many cases, you could have a millennial leading some baby boomers. Talk about clashes and talk about opportunity. So again, I look at it from the what and the how. We do a really good job teaching them the what, but as much as you can interject in the classroom to help them develop the more the competency on the skill application side of it, whether that be, again, being with conflict resolution, even feedback, giving and receiving feedback, especially receiving feedback. As a student, you get a grade, okay? Well, in the business world, you get a grade, but sometimes that grade comes in many different ways. It can come on feedback on a project. It can come as feedback from some coworkers. It can come as literally a grade on a project, which then equates to a certain, monetary reward, whether that be an annual merit increase or that be a goal, a budgetary goal type thing. So I think you're spot on, and I don't know that. It's something that every class has to adapt to that kind of thinking, but I think it's best as we can prepare students on that competency side, on the how. how to apply those skills, and understanding that they're going to live in the gray a lot. There's very seldom in corporate America, unless you're dealing with some very strict legal issues or strict accounting practice or what have you, you live in the gray. And I find that sometimes, especially some of the newer folks into the business world, just have a hard time living in the gray because they've been so trained and so precise about it's this or it's this. That makes sense?
So I want to add, so I teach a class on campus, a leadership class in hospitality and tourism management. And I kind of do some of this stuff because one of the things that I learned just being a young professional and going into the workplace is that I thought, okay, if you ask me to do a task, that you're going to give me the time to do it. But that's not always the case in business, and it's almost very rarely the case. And I had to really learn the hard way, like, if you don't get month end done, you have to take your computer home and finish it. And so some of the things that I actually do in the class, I always start off my class with giving them a terrible example. I give them a TED Talk that's really a bad example of leadership. And then I let them watch the video, and then in that first class after the video, I'll ask them, like, what did you think? And they'll say, oh, they'll try to give me like some perspective. And I'm like, but wasn't that video, what did you think? And they're like, it really wasn't very good. She didn't seem like she knew what she was talking about. And so I usually make a statement like, well, that's how professors feel when you come to their class and you don't read. And the whole room will go silent, and they're like, I said, so because there's being in a room and not understanding, what's going on is hugely important in business. If you don't know what's happening, then you're behind. Another thing, I tell them right off the back, I don't give rubric. We don't have rubric in real life. Like when you go and you own a business, nobody's going to tell you, here's the matrix and here's how. So I don't give, and it creates a certain level of stress that over the course of my class, I work hard to bring down, because first of all, I teach a class, it's a senior level course. So a lot of them are going to graduate and go to get a job. And so my goal is to get them out of the habit of having to be graded at something and to live up to my expectation and to begin to form their own expectation of themselves and what should you be doing as a professional. I put them in groups based on a very basic kind of like color code, true colors assessment to kind of start teaching them about team building and about you won't be on a team with people necessarily that you like, necessarily that are like you, right? You won't, but the strengths of those teams are important, and so you can kind of do some of those things where you negotiate, especially in team. And I'll tell them, this is your team assignment. You all figure out how to present it. And they're like, no, give us direction. No, that doesn't always happen, right? You really do have to learn to live in the gray. I love that terminology. And so I think incorporating some of those into the classroom really helps. I also make them earn their participation points. So in my class, we don't come in and you don't just get discussion points because you showed up. I have little cards that I've created, and my professor did this to me, and this is how I learned. Little cards, and they have a kiss on them, and I tell them, if you want your grade, then you have to earn it. I have a very short window of points. There's only so many points in this class because, and it's a 100-point class. Discussion is worth 10. If you don't get that 10, you're already down to a 90% in the class. And so it makes them have to think about how they can work hard and give a meaningful topic. And so we do little power dynamic type things. We just do different things. So there are some things that you can do to get the students thinking along that line way before they get out of college. So
I'll briefly just add to add on to what these guys have said already. I remember as a student, one of the first things I would always do is look for the syllabus and see how the entire semester is laid out. Because then I would also, later on, I would start to get ahead of things. I'd say, oh, we need to read this. I've got some downtime, I'm gonna read it ahead of time. That's not how the real world works, right? So just a little thing that comes to the top of my head, and just remembering like homework assignments and getting those all done ahead of time to bring in a little bit more of that spontaneity. And then also, what Becky was saying of working with different people, the more you can promote that, the better. I mean, I do manage a 55-year-old,
Yeah.
and that's like one of the weirdest things for me right now. It's not the deadlines or unexpected projects, it's managing a team dynamics of 55-year-old, a 40-year-old, and me, a 26-year-old, all on the same team together, and how we work together, from one guy who barely knows how to use a computer, and me who, I mean, was born with one basically in my hand. And just the communication styles and how that's all so different is one of the big challenges that I see working with.
One of the things along those lines that some of business has gone to is reverse mentoring, where they'll take a more senior person, so they'll take that 55-year-old and they will buddy them up with a millennial and reverse mentor. And again, it's not to get that 50-year-old to learn how to use the computer and, make them be a, whiz in Excel, but it's more about them working together to kind of understand how each other is thinking. They can still get results, and they can still get really good results, but it's also about gaining that respect and that simple understanding of the skills and the approach to getting the mission accomplished, if you will, especially for a young leader like yourself.
And 55 is not old, I'm just
Yeah, be
saying.
careful. Be really careful.
This 55-year-old does not
Be
know how to
really
use the laptop. I know many 55-year-olds do.
More experience, Use the word.
So
more
how often do you have
experience.
to dig yourself out of a hole?
Yeah.
Quite a bit, quite a bit.
Alternate phraseology.
Yeah, something that was said that I think is important is communication, what we've talked about. All of us have a preferred communication style. I'm working with some individuals who are extremely frustrated because they have some individuals on a team that want to only communicate via social media. And they only want to communicate via text and items like that. They hate the face-to-face communication. And this individual is extremely frustrated that they can't convince them that face-to-face communication is the most important way to communicate. Well, I don't know whether I've fully engaged in the realization, but for some people, the best way to communicate with them is social media and texting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only way they're actually going to listen and hear you. I think face-to-face communication is a learned skill, and it is vitally important, but some people haven't come to that realization yet. And if it frustrates me that they don't want to communicate that way, I'm the problem. It's not them. Because they still need to be communicated with, and if the only way they're going to hear me is through that means, then I'll communicate that way. But all of us have a preferred communication style, and it's okay to ask what the individual's preferred communication means is. I just joined this bank 3 months ago. The bank president, who I directly report to, hates email, hates texting. He wants to be communicated with via phone or face-to-face. What's most convenient for me sometimes is shooting off an email, because I'm in the middle of something and don't have time to stop and communicate in that way. But knowing that about him, I find the time to set aside to pick up the phone and call him when I need to. It's not my preferred means of communication. I would prefer to get an email, and if you can't say what you have to say in the first 3 lines of the email, chances are I may not read the whole thing. And that's generally accepted among most people, that's all you're going to see if you don't catch their attention and communicate in that way. So if somebody asks me what my preferred communication style is, I'm going to say email. And that's what I like, but that doesn't mean necessarily what I'm going to give the people. So as a means of communication, you need to understand that dynamic, that you need to understand how people want to be communicated with and how you want to be communicated with. That's not a long discussion, but it's also very important.
Come back around to sort of the beginning of the conversation and maybe dig in a little bit more to the how. We're getting a lot of good pointers, a lot of good suggestions here, but I think all of you at the beginning talked about the importance of getting people out of their silos and giving people this cross-functional experience and broadening their skill sets. And I think Josh said, you see now the value of it, but when you were here, right, right? And I think that's kind of a common theme. I think a lot of us as faculty members, we see the value in it. But convincing the students of that, how do we, what mechanism, what levers can we pull to convince students while they're here to engage in those kinds of things?
Can I interrupt you too? Do we have these kind of classes, or is it just within Management 101 or whatever? Like, do we have specifically leadership classes that everyone is required to take? Do we have business communication classes that everyone is required to take? All that? Okay. Sorry, I didn't know.
In some cases, yes, in some cases, no, I would say. Right? I think it's kind of a mixed bag.
What about you, 311? That's where we communicate a lot in that class. So we have to learn how to do different roles.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
So, I mean, and I guess I would even say beyond just sort of the curriculum, right? Beyond requiring certain classes, is there a way to make it, you know, sort of something that students would seek out rather than being forced into? Because I think we've all had that experience that if it's something that we're required to do, we're forced into it, we value it less. We just sort of try to hold our nose and get through it, right? How can we convince students that it's worthwhile instead of just forcing them?
I know,
Everybody look at
that's hard.
Yeah.
I would say how I learned, you know, if you're asking how I learned that because at age 16, I started working at McDonald's. I was forced into customer interaction. I was forced into sales. I was forced into understanding what the management structure meant and a hierarchy. So it came from practical application and real world work. I don't remember who it was who said, you know, at age 18, my dad was the dumbest person I ever met. And by the time I got to be age 25, I couldn't believe how much the old man had learned. You know, there's no replacement for experience. And encouraging students to seek out some experience, and maybe that's the mentoring, where that spend a day with. Just, if you don't have time for an internship or anything, spend a Saturday working someplace to volunteer. And it will be amazing what you are able to observe in that. Plus, it's going to benefit someone from a not-for-profit, but encourage that participation even in a volunteer, or seek out an opportunity on a Friday when they may not have classes. Is there a business that would allow them, a student, to come in and just sit and talk with someone for the day so that they see the practical real-world side of it? I would welcome a student to be able to come spend a couple hours with me on some day in my place of work, and to be able to sit down and be able to just have that one-on-one communication is part of the how. Teaching that how in a classroom situation, I think, is a tremendous challenge to be able to do that. Unless you're able to bring some individuals in from the workforce, from a volunteer company or something like that, and do group dynamic conversations. I think it can't be in a setting like this where you have a lecture and you have people who are going to listen. That how has to be interactive, extremely interactive.
I'm with David. Excuse me, I don't think that there is a class that you can put together to do this. I think what it is it's about creating the opportunity and the exposure. And when, even if it's part of social clubs or it's part of just sessions like this, it's giving the exposure and causing the students to think differently and appreciate that. You know, maybe something additional that can be done, you know, on campuses. Maybe there's some type of joint efforts that are done across colleges. So you're getting different type of thinking, or maybe even across just the functional areas within the College of Business, you know, where you're bringing people together that you know don't necessarily think exactly the same way. You know, the ELC, I think Joan just left, okay? The ELC is a great opportunity for something, you know, something like that also. But I think it's creating the opportunity and the exposure. And to be honest with you, to some degree, the student has to welcome it and open, and when that door is opened, we've got to help them walk through the door, but they then got to keep going through that door, okay? Because you can't do it all in the classroom, but you've got to give them the opportunity to see it and to participate in it. sorry, there was a question.
I just had a specific question for David. Are there any like particular companies you could recommend that would accept volunteers, like just saying like on a Saturday for a few hours, that would be more than welcome to accept volunteers?
I know Northern Illinois Food Bank does. Our family has volunteered with them since we've been here the last 17 years. Haven't done so in the last 2 years. But we started with our kids when they were old enough. I think 11 years old was as young as they would accept. And then even when they were younger, they let them do some minor jobs. But I know that's one. But there are many, many not-for-profits who love to get volunteers. I mean, I could see if I can get some things back to you, back to Bill, as I think
But I
through
think
that.
he's talking, are you talking more job shadowing kind of stuff?
Job shadowing?
Yeah, that's what I think.
Job
he's shadowing,
shadowing?
like coming in and spending a day with, what are you doing Tuesday?
I'm busy Tuesday. No. No, I mean, I think there are many, and I think seeking out the alumni through the alumni arm would be a way to be able to do that. And just ask that question. Are there some alumni that are currently in their careers that would be willing to allow somebody to shadow for a couple hours? You know, I'm fairly certain there's a number of them in the DeKalb-Sycamore area that would be willing to do that. I know some individuals that I would want to check with first, that, because I spent 8 years working in this area, that from a banking perspective or other perspective, I'm pretty sure they would be open to that. Because it's interesting, and I think we've already said this, every employer wants every employee to succeed. And the more that they can get exposure to individuals, it'll help them in their business as well. So everybody wants to be cooperative, but
Can I add something to that though first? If you're on LinkedIn, connect with alumni and just ask the question. I mean, I encourage students all the time. If you want to know if somebody will let you come into and shadow with them, ask them. What's the worst they can say is no, right? And so I would encourage you to use your resources like LinkedIn
Excellent.
and connect with alumni, or go through. I don't know if the College of Business, I'm guessing that they do has a LinkedIn page where you can look for alumni. If you're looking for a specific company, you can look for that company and look for alumni from your university that are in that company and say, hey, and let me just say this, the feedback that we get, alumni, NIU alumni, they love to have students. They love for students to contact them, right? Or if there's somebody that you just kind of follow, reach out, ask the question. You have your professors, you can ask them. They are a wealth of resource because they know all kind of people that they would love to open up your connection. I do the same thing. If people come to my office and they ask me a question, let me see who I can get you to talk to, because you work your network. And ask the question, and don't be afraid to hear no, because no is a real thing. Because and some people don't like the job shadow, but there are tons of people that are like, yeah, you can come spend a couple hours with me, get me out of my day, or get to talk to
Or
me,
just have lunch with
or
me.
just have lunch with me,
Yeah.
and they'll pay for it. Like,
It's a free meal.
It's a free meal. So I would just encourage you to just step out and just ask people if for their time, and they'll be willing to give it.
And I'll propose that the professors, if you have an area like you want to follow somebody who's an auditor or follow somebody who's a marketing manager, go talk to that professor. They've got contacts and all. So, if somebody came to me, and I teach I teach audit. Somebody came to me and said, I want to follow an auditor for a day. I would give you 10 names of people that you could call this week, and probably by the end of the week you'd be doing that. I'm certain for other faculty in their particular areas. So that not only gets you somebody to shadow, but it gets you somebody to shadow in the area that you want to be learning, like the area that you're interested in.
Well, and taking that one step further, you could end up building that personal connection and end up, I'm a believer that the best mentoring programs are the informal mentoring programs where they're developed over time. And don't get me wrong, I'm not against the formal ones, but where you develop that relationship personally and you kind of take someone under your wings or they take you under their wings kind of thing, I think those are the most incredible relationships that can be developed. And so something as simple as that can turn into a long-term relationship.
The mentors I have, I wouldn't say were ever formal.
No, I never had, yeah.
I had no idea, they probably didn't realize they were a mentor to me maybe, but They were, I sought them out and I sought counsel, so. Is there someone, yes?
I've been teaching 21 years here, so I've had roughly about 3,000 students. I think in the 21 years, I've had one employer come back to me and say that they had a person who wasn't technically qualified to do their jobs. Gets back to what Becky said about how technically qualified our students are. But I do get more comments back from employers about professionalism, even to the standpoint of having had 5 or 6 or 7 students over the last 10 years or so who were actually terminated from their job, not because they couldn't do it, but they couldn't make that transition from student behavior to professional behavior and such. You know, it's coming into a classroom 3 or 4 minutes late all the time seems like it's okay as a student. Showing up for a business meeting 3 to 5 minutes late every time is not. So if you could just talk in general about the importance of professionalism in what they in what you do and what you see in there, that I think that'd be a big help to students.
I deal with it every day. I mean, I talk to students every day about professionalism and making that transition, and that's usually one of the statements I make is that my goal, our goal here, we're at an institution of education because we want to teach you, but we also want to help you make that transition from student to professional. And I like to say from wearing jogging pants to wearing a business suit, right? Because there's a huge difference in that, and not just for students, but I think it's also, it's kind of what's ingrained in them, right? So some of that is us as an institution, right? Because we allow students to come in late, 3 or 4 minutes late, right? If you allow some of that, then, you know, the student is going to say, oh, well, I don't have to be in that class. And it could be just, it's always that one professor. And it's like, I know I could get that professor and I'm good, or I could just get, and so I think some of it is students, they are inundated with all kind of messages, and I think this goes back to like, how do we, you know, how do we get this information to them? Well, we workshop them to death, we program them to death, we give them all kinds of resources, and of course those things that are going to stick are just going to stick. And so I've resigned myself to the fact that some people are just they just late, or they just kind of, and I think that, you know, how we have those conversations with our students, and quite honestly with some faculty and staff, like how you navigate those conversations about, you know, professionalism and professional behavior. I think that there's a workshop for that. There's a YouTube video for that, you know, and I'm a big advocate of saying, you know what, I saw this awesome TED talk about this. Maybe you should just listen in on it, right? Because sometimes I think students are completely turned off by the blatant, like, well, you're late. I put it in my syllabus, you know, in terms of being late or being absent and the effect that it has on the classroom, and we talk about it. And so I think maybe having those conversations, and I think from a student awareness, I think a lot of students know the information. So I don't think it's a lack of knowledge. I think it's just, this is how I am, who I am, and what I want to do. And I think as a professional, when you walk into that business that first time and you're late, yeah, or you're unprofessional in that you say the wrong thing, you have the wrong type of conversation, that awkwardness, that helps to give you some teaching moments. So some people need on-the-job training.
Emery, I appreciate, that's not my question about how we teach it, okay? Because we all do that in your syllabus. You can't be late. I'm very big on professionalism. But they're hearing it from me. I want you guys as professionals, to the video and to the students here, to tell them, because when it comes from you guys, that's much more important, what you expect and how important it is for in your careers and to your people in the workforce to be professional. That's how we teach professionalism. We try and we do as much. But again, when I bring a professional into my classroom and they talk about the importance of being professional, that's what drives it. So that's what I want you to convey.
I think kind of what Dave was saying, what would you do if you had a new hire and they were late to meetings, they weren't prepared, they had their phone out, the phone was going off, they're doing text, you're trying to do a conversation with them and they have their phone on. I have students that do it in my classroom, and man, I hate to be the you-know-what in the room, but there's times I want to just go up there, is this more important than my class? You can leave. You know, if you need to, if grandpa's dying, I get it,
Yeah.
but you don't need to be on the phone while you're in class. You got an hour or whatever time it is in class.
And I'll
So
even-
that kind of importance, I think is what Dave's saying.
And it's even changing. I will tell you that people get really annoyed, especially managers in business, when they're looking for somebody and they're out in the back smoking their cigarettes now because they got to go 20 feet out in the back. Smoking is becoming an unprofessional activity. I know students who work and students who go in the workforce. I know you guys work with the earbuds all the time.
Yeah.
In some organizations that is professional, and others
It is.
it's not to be there with the earbuds and things like that. So, please address professionalism in your world.
Well, I think you're spot on with it. I think the world in general has gotten more casual. And I think as a result of that, it becomes more difficult in the workplace to be able to enforce. I think one of the biggest things is as we prepare students to go into the workforce, and again, I'm going to stick with just kind of corporate America, if you will, is one of the very first things that they've got to understand is what is the culture at that organization, what is acceptable, okay? And, one of the biggest ones that I always struggle with is this whole thing about casual workwear. Well, casual to me is much different than it is to Terry or David, okay? And so what happens is you get this erosion as this sloppiness. First of all, I think the tone starts at the top. So whoever that leader is,
Did you just call me sloppy?
casual means different.
Or David, you told me.
I said David too. I include David. I didn't call you sloppy.
I'm sloppy.
I would never call you sloppy. But I think the tone is at the top of the organization and how they want professionalism administered. Okay, it's everything from attire. Okay, but I think students have got to understand when you go in that organization, what is it? It's not inappropriate going in for an interview to ask before you go for that interview what is appropriate attire. That recruiter should know that. Okay, and should be able to give that student, if you will, or that potential hire, the recommendation. So you get beyond the clothing, what have you, and then you start, when you get into the organization, you start to watch. You start to watch what other people do, but be careful who you're watching because your coworker could be the sloppiest person, could be the sloppiest person in town. But I'd make sure I have a full understanding of what that exactly is, what's acceptable, not acceptable. As far as tardiness goes, well, first of all, I'm not one, and I think Ann kind of alluded to this, I just despise rewarding people for coming to work on time every day. That is an expectation, okay? What is the work hours? Now, I understand there's a lot of flexibility in hours, okay? That's fine with me. Some people work remotely. That's all fine. But by golly, if you've got a meeting to be at, you better be there, okay? And unless, again, going to what Pam was talking about, yes, there are exceptions, okay? But that's the rare occasion. But I think we've got to help students understand that being on time, being prompt, and being prepared. And that doesn't mean running into a meeting late with your laptop, I got to set it up and I don't have any cords and where's my cords and whatever, because that's just going to just wholly inhibit the whole professionalism. Now, you're dealing with folks that are going to be auditors that potentially are working for some of the biggest consulting houses. Every time they go to a different client, you did this, there's a cultural difference in each client. So they've got to understand that what my filter is, my personal filter, and the way I see it may not necessarily be the way it is in every organization that I go to. And if I'm not willing to adapt, there's repercussion to that. And repercussion can mean you can be terminated for it. You can be terminated for not being at work on time, not being prepared, not being professional. The other thing too, quite frankly, is on the professionalism side is communication. And some people, are very mouthy. A lot of corporate America, you're sitting in cubicles. I'm gonna tell you what, you can hear everything. You can hear everything. Well, Dave and I are sitting here talking with a wall between us. I'm gonna tell you, everybody around you can hear. And yeah, I don't like that Ann, Ann looked at me kind of funny today, so, boy, I don't really like her. Well, the next thing you know, the HR department's in, you got all kinds of stuff. So it's understanding, and again, I think some of that is inherent. I don't know that you can teach it all in the classroom, but one of the best pieces of advice I'd have for you is to demonstrate it yourself. Because the shadow of the leader, and whatever that leader is, whether that be a coworker, whether that be a a committee chairperson, whatever, that's the person that's setting this tone. So I think we've all got to make sure that our shadows are really casting the right one. And I think you're spot on with the professionalism. I grew up in a culture where, I mean, going to business casual was like almost a disaster, you know, because people didn't know what it meant. And I've sent home in my HR career, I've sent home many an employee for not having enough clothes on. Yes.
Well, Josh, I'd say you've probably seen the biggest variance in culture, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I was gonna say what Becky was saying about finding the culture of the organization. I mean, this is the first time I've worn business casual in like 2.5 years.
Yeah,
I
you
don't
were-
just
you
don't
were
wear
suit.
anymore. Wear sweatpants and just come in t-shirts to work. So it's totally different wherever you go. But when I was at PwC, what I saw was when students got the job after the internship, they looked at it as if that was the arrival point, like that was the end point. And I saw a lot of people lose their edge, and I've done it too, where last year I had an amazing year at Team Vision. Like I said, raised $2 million, and this year I've caught myself a couple times just slipping back a little bit, either taking a day off when maybe I had a meeting but I rescheduled it. Just little things where you start to think like, okay, I've got the job, I'm here, I'm not gonna get fired. I know, I thought that all the time at PwC. I thought they're never gonna fire me. They need people, like, they just won't get rid of you. You have to really mess up. And that attitude is just totally wrong. And I've seen so many people just, I mean, like you said, start showing up late or just not doing the work on time, and you just can't get away with it. And you need us to keep coming in here and talking about those things. And I mean, even back to what you were saying, Bart, like of how to promote the just experience of getting other areas. We need to come in and keep telling you guys too, you need to hear from us. I don't remember hearing about those things when I was at the College of Business. I remember a lot of presentations that I sat through in SAS about business casual and things like that, but I never remembered hearing of how wide a range of people that I would work with. So just constantly hearing it from us and bringing us in to talk about things like that, it's important. There's no doubt about it.
Can I interject one thing real quickly though? I guess I have somewhat of a unique view because I get a chance to talk to a wide variety of faculty, and somewhat to your point, Dave, everyone doesn't have that standard. Every faculty member in this building does not have the standard of no phones out and watch how you dress. And so, to a point, I understand that, you know, the consistency in the corporate, but if we're truly going to model, then perhaps we need to get all of our faculty and teaching staff on the same page, not just accountancy, but maybe in some of all of the areas. Because I know when I see a student walk in pajama pants, to me that's unacceptable. But they're walking to someone else's class and they're not being told to go back and change. So the standard is not the same everywhere, and maybe we need to, I'm not saying we have to, I'm just saying if we want the message to be consistent, maybe that's something we need to agree upon as faculty and administration and staff.
But I think the
I'd like
point I think the point from the panel is it's not consistent after they leave here.
Yeah, and
So that's-
I'd like to kind of present the alternative perspective that I think it's healthy that you have different standards that you've got to accomplish. You know, and you got to juggle. You know, personally, I have the policy in my classrooms that I explicitly say, yes, your technology's welcome, but use it for the class. If I catch you using it for purposes outside the class, I mean, so many students are using tablets and computers, and they're not, you know, they're using it to access class materials, and that's fine with me. And you have to learn that skill here so you could do it because you're using technology in the real world. So to just say, no, you can't use it, to me is inappropriate. But, you know, when I do find that somebody's in the back row watching a movie, I'll tell them, you know what, that's inappropriate. Close it down or learn to adapt. As far as I'd tell the student who's wearing pajamas, that's a bad idea. Dress at a higher standard that you know, meets the requirements across your classes. But I would not want to see us become even more artificial or separated from what the real world is by having a single standard for all of us, because I think that's unrealistic.
Well, I agree with you, especially on the dress side, that I mean, you go from being an auditor at a bank where you're expected to wear a shirt and tie, to going to a manufacturing facility where blue jeans may be appropriate because it's kind of a messy place to be. But there are still other things in terms of communication and dress. What you put in an email to your buddies and how you use abbreviations and things is not appropriate in a business email. Going, again, being on time and being prepared to work. I have it in my syllabus. Be there on time, be there ready to work at the start of class and all. Very honestly, we as faculty members have a lot, very little authority. If you took a student and you said, leave my class, you're inappropriately dressed, they can go on up into the administration because you would have to really show they were inappropriately dressed. And pajama pants, from the student's perspective, is not inappropriately dressed. So dress issues and I'm with Terry, my students have computers out, and again, I try to make sure they're using it, but there are still other kinds of standards here, as I said, in terms of communication. Things like, you're not supposed to be carrying on private conversations. It's disrespectful to other people. Working on Sudoku in the Northern Star while the class is going on. Those sorts of things, those professional behaviors, I don't care where you're working, those professional behaviors hold. You're in a meeting with people, you're focused on that meeting. You're prepared, as Anne Marie said, you're prepared. You came in and you read the report that's going to be discussed there. That if you're using technology, you're using it appropriately. All those things, I think, hold across the board. I think, yes, when you're talking about dress, we're at this point. I just know a manager who finally had to lay down the rules that said flip-flops and gym shorts were no longer allowed in his business. And I said, well, how did it ever get that way? And he said, well, you started with business casual, and it got worse and worse and worse. So,
Right.
Dress is a big
This is big.
issue that varies, but some of these other things are much more important, and they are consistent across businesses, whether it's not-for-profits or whatever.
I think to me, the bottom line is respect. You have to realize who you're working for, and it may be a client that you're working for, and that you're in a sales role. You have to be respectful. I'm working for a bank now where the bank president wears jeans every time he comes in. Not appropriate for me to wear that. Today, Fridays are business casual, which is jeans days. And what did I do today? I didn't wear jeans today because I knew I was going to be on a panel. I have respect for the audience of who we're participating with today. So I dressed as I would for work every day, to get the realization that it's not me focused. When you get out into the real world, it's not about you. It's about who you're working for and what you're doing. It's not about you. And the biggest thing that I have an issue with is people not accepting personal responsibility, which I think is unprofessional. It comes back to that professionalism, is teaching that personal responsibility, respect the people you're working for, respect the environment you're in. I think it's a respect issue, not a professionalism issue. Anyway, you've been very patient waiting for your spot. Please.
Well, as a student, I actually think my professors do actually a really good job making sure we're on time, we're respectful. One of my favorite professor, I'm a finance major, in the finance department are so strict on being on time and everything, to the point if you're not on time and we have clicker questions, you're gonna miss all the points. They make sure that there's clicker points, and if, I have one professor that's really strict, she's my favorite, but if you walk in front of her, if you slam the doors, if you're not on time, she knows. We were known, like she would collect the homework in the beginning, if you're not there on time, you're not getting your points. And I think our professors do a really good job on that, especially in Year 310, where we have to dress up. If you're not dressed up, then, you're not gonna do well. So I think actually our professors do a really good job making sure, they tell us every day, they advise us to do this, and if you pay attention to class, I think we get every advice we need. If you're not on time, there's always gonna be slackers, and I always feel like they do a good job of giving us advice on everything.
Okay, good. Yes.
Just to add on to what she had to say, Unit 311,
going off the whole dress code or wearing pajama pants or not, if it's just a casual class or a normal class, I don't see anything wrong with that. But in U.S. 311, we had simulations where you were part of a marketing team, finance team, operations team, accounting team, and you were told business professional or casual. You knew you weren't supposed to be late. You knew to have the respect and responsibilities of what was expected from you. So in certain situations, I think the university does teach us that.
Great.
And the use of laptops, such as if the student's doing that in class, I think that's more of a loss to him or her for not paying attention and just, I mean, getting out in the real world, all right, you got this degree, but what can you do with it? Sure, you push through it, but did you fully understand the material? Did you fully,
So if I could redirect just a little bit, in the time we have left, 3 of the 4 of the members here are here through the Belief program, through some association with LEAD and ethics and that sort of thing. This is an ethics event for the students who are here for Passport. So if we could just spend the remaining time from that perspective in terms of, Josh, what you wish you had learned from the ethics perspective for the professionals, what you wish our students would know, how we could better prepare them from that aspect. We spend a lot of time on it, but could we do better? Or how could we do better?
Well, I mean, I love to lead. I know you can't require that for everyone, but I got a ton out of that, and I honestly can't even say what I really wish I would have learned more from the Belief program because I was involved in LEAD. So I would say, if you're not in LEAD, be in it, just because. And at the time, I thought, I mean, it was an awesome way to meet people from other majors. It wasn't all accounting or all finance. It was all over the College of Business. And it exposed you to a new group of people, diverse group of people besides just their major focus. But how much of it is applied to the real world has really just kind of surprised me. I mean, I admit I joined it because I wanted to pad my resume, and KPMG was a part of it, and I thought maybe one day I wanted to work for them. But the amount that I've got back from it has been awesome. Being in it, you think, oh, well, I'm not going to incorporate or come into any multi-million-dollar scandals, but maybe this will help in some one-off way. But even just the little things, the amount of times that I catch myself thinking, like, I wonder what Bill would say, or like, I wonder what Bart would think of this right now. Like, just the other day, I've got, in downtown Chicago, we have the parking app on our phone, and you can only hook up one credit card to it. And so I've used that for the majority of my work parking when I'm around the city, but the other day I had something personal, and rather than going to the machine, I just pulled up my phone and started putting in, I'm like, no, you can't do that. There's little things that you learn from groups like LEAD, and it really, I mean, every single decision, once a day at least, I'm thinking of what is the right way to go about this. So to be more involved in LEAD and all the Belief program, I think is a huge benefit for you guys that you should be taking advantage of.
I don't know if y'all participate in the ethics competition or if we're gonna have it again this year, but do that. I've been a judge for that, and it is so fascinating with what you students come up with. So, I mean, and they're very interesting topics and situations, and so if you haven't had the opportunity to participate in that, I would. So I was at a conference once in Boston, and as I was going out to get into the shuttle, there was a parking attendant who was like helping, and I strike up conversations with basically anyone. And I asked him, you know, kind of just what was his background, what was his experience. He was a more experienced gentleman, not older, more experienced gentleman. And what he said to me was, he worked for one of the companies, and he worked for a company that had a major financial scandal, and he had lost his pension. And right then, I had the understanding before, but that solidified for me the importance of being an ethical leader, right, and understanding that the decisions that we make, ethical, how ethical or not ethical, they impact other people. And I think that oftentimes, we may not necessarily think about that, but I think programs like the Belief program, like, you know, the ethics program, they teach you that. And so that when you're in those situations and you're meeting people like that, like, for a person to have worked 30 years, get a pension, don't have it because of the decision, unethical, of someone else, and now they have to do a parking attendant, it just kind of like blew my mind. It was a different mindset. But from that experience, at that point, I thought, wow, how important is ethics in everything that, not just that we do in the work world, but just in our own personal lives. And I think that our personal ethics definitely reflect through what we do in our professional lives, or at least they should. So you shouldn't be ethical in one and unethical in another, right? So there should definitely be a mesh. And so as a young professional, one of the situations that I encountered, I worked for a school lunch program, which was really sponsored by the USDA. And so there are certain things that you have to do, certain, if you don't do them, if you don't count meals right, you can't just turn in numbers and make up numbers. And at the time, I was working with a business manager who, this was her first year in the program, and what she told to me was, she was like, you know what, just have them come up with numbers, just have them write down numbers. And I was like, no, we won't be doing that today, right? Because I came into the workplace with my own professional set of ethics, and I don't remember having to take an ethics course. So, oh my goodness, what would happen if I didn't have my own personal ethics? So I would definitely advise students to develop your own personal ethics. Develop that set now. Take the classes, participate, get as much information. Don't say, I don't need to know that, I already know right from wrong. Ethics is not always about that. It's a broader concept, and I think getting that understanding now will help you as you face those situations in your professional lives, wherever they may lead you.
Good point. Along those lines, I think programs such as the Belief program and really incorporating the ethics education within all you do within the College of Business is wonderful, because what it does, I believe, is it helps especially the students understand and realize their own personal filters, and where those personal filters might conflict with questionable situations or potentially ethical situations. So at least it gives you a more solid awareness of yourself, and then to be able to think about things as you're confronted with them. But from a personal perspective and from a corporate perspective, I'll tell you what, I think I still commend my company for giving me the opportunity to be part of the Belief Advisory Board for all the years we have been, and I'm hopeful that you've heard back that there is a replacement coming from NICOR, because I've been lobbying to make sure, and it's that you get that. So I know who it is, and I think it'll be a great ad. But I think that the Belief program, the way that program is set up, is one of the best models that can help the College of Business bring together this whole understanding of business students and faculty. I enjoyed every board meeting I was at, every program I've been part of, the camaraderie and the learnings that go on between the students, the advisory board, and the faculty, I think, are phenomenal. It's opened my eyes an awful lot. You know, from just a corporate perspective, it's opened my eyes to the challenges that you have both as faculty and also as students, as you either prepare students to go into this new big business world, and or the students as you go into it. I think it's an incredible program. One of the other great parts of that program, Ann referred to on the case competitions. Early on, we were involved in, when we were preparing the students, the teams of students going out to the Eller case competition. Talk about what a great dynamic is. They're confronted with some kind of really strange situation, but they're sitting there and getting guidance from folks that have actually been in boardrooms, that have lived and breathed these kinds of situations, that can help not necessarily direct the students on kind of their approach to resolving or arguing their case relative to the situation they've been given, but it can give them opportunity to gain feedback and cause their thinking just to be a little bit different. So I think I enjoy those, coming out here coming out here at night, working with the students and helping them build that, building their case, if you will, for competition. So I commend the university. It's a great program, and I talk about it all the time.
From that Belief side, the Belief Week has been one of the things that I've seen the most valuable, because I've had the opportunity, some professors have asked me to come in to their class and participate in their class. Gives me the chance to speak with as many students as possible. So my encouragement to the professors would be, utilize those resources. I was always amazed by the questions the students would ask and the interaction that they were begging for from business professionals coming in, and having that opportunity to speak with those students. If you haven't taken advantage of that, if you haven't sought out business professionals, even if you know somebody during that week, if they've never been associated with Belief, but to be able to come in and actually interact with the students and ask them, what do you see ethical issues being? And letting myself or Becky or any of us be able to say, here's how we've dealt with that situation. Yes, this is a real world thing. People cheat on their expense reports all the time. Sometimes my peers encourage their employees to cheat on their expense reports because they were not able to get a raise through for that individual and they want them to be paid more. And seeing the reaction of the students say, that really happens? Yes, that happens day in and day out. To me, of all the things, is teaching ethics and interaction with ethics at NIU has been those times where I've been in front of the students and as much possible exposure, a lot of value from interaction with the professionals and the board and the peer and everything. But to me, the most important thing is that one-on-one interaction with the students. I can't tell you how many students have connected with me on LinkedIn. And now how many alumni have connected with me on LinkedIn. And like 2 years later, I'll get a pop-up question or a message that'll say, hey, something you said made a difference. And that's all the reward that I would ever need. If I said one thing that impacted one student one time, that's huge. But I've always been impressed by the questions. So I would encourage you to utilize those resources.